Hey, everybody. I'm delighted to bring you my interview with Dr. Siri Zemel. She's an academic who found herself speaking in tongues and found herself in such a delicious, warm, loving place that she had to dive deeper and eventually bridge science and spirituality and share it with others. Can't wait to share this with you. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Next Level Healing. I'm your host, Dr. Tara Perry. My guest today is Dr. Siri Zemel. She is the author of Guided: Journey into the Unknown to Awaken the Soul and Live in Truth. She earned her PhD in mind-body medicine from Saybrook University and her undergraduate and graduate degrees in nutrition science from the University of Tennessee. Welcome to Next Level Healing, Dr. Siri.
What a delight to be here.
And we just found out that we could have done this live because we're both in Nashville.
Place to be.
Goodness. So you have a very wonderful combination of traditional Western treatment background, academia, and then you started to find out that you have this otherworldly connection that also serves you and other people at a really high level. Take us back in time. What was it like to be in the sort of 3D linear world and then have this other world seep in?
Yeah. So just a small point of correction, that connection with the other world. Sometimes I call the other side, and then I realize it's not the other side at all. It's right here. It's another dimension we always have access to. Actually, I was born with. So I remember being very, very young, playing in my bedroom on the wooden floors and connecting with what I then perceived to be imaginary friends, and which I now know were my spirit guides and angels around me. And so I communicated with them for as long as I can remember. And actually, what ended up happening was I lost the connection as I grew older, and no one else around me was talking about their spirit guides or the angelic realm or connecting to non-physical entities and beings that were by their side. And it just kind of fell into the background. What's interesting and a little bit unique about my story, although as I get more and more into the research, I realize it's not so unique after all. There's lots of us out there. But what is distinctive about my story is that this connection always came through for me through a language, through these verbal utterances. When I was little, I thought I just, made it up. I was just made up language, but it's just always flowed through me. And so in the years from about age 5 to 25, I wasn't consciously connecting with my guides, but this language would still spill out of me. Typically, when I was alone, maybe I would be cleaning my house or doing laundry, or sometimes in meditation, sometimes on walks, sometimes as words, often as song, and this sense of complete euphoria and connectedness and wholeness always came. So that's where I would go. It's my prayer language, my soul language, right? And then the older I got, the more I realized, well, what? This is weird. What even is this? I got curious just cognitively about the whole thing.
And what age were you when you had that sort of dichotomy going on?
Good question. I'm not always great with timelines and numbers, but let me put it maybe somewhere around 30 to 35.
And you've had a really pretty strong academic career going on at this point, right?
Yeah. Well, I had completed my undergrad and graduate degrees in nutrition science. I was practicing as a registered dietitian. I was working with eating disorder clients. I was running an eating disorder center, done a lot of patient care for years. And then I moved into executive leadership. And so I was doing budget and finance and hiring, firing, and policy writing and all of that jazz. And I was pretty buttoned up. I was pretty disconnected and fractured from this spiritual, soulful part of myself. And I knew something was missing. And at that point, I wanted to go back and get my doctorate. And like something was calling me. There was this calling. And so I completed my doctorate, as you mentioned, at Saybrook in mind-body medicine. And at that time, this kind of connection, this link between everything that's happening physically, everything that's happening mentally, in our psyche, emotionally, spiritually, and linking them all. My minor in my doctoral program was in healthcare systems. So really looking at within our mainstream system of healthcare, how do we integrate this piece that we don't, this invisible piece that we can't hold and contain and measure, right? And so at that time, I was doing my dissertation, and I had this invitation to do my doctoral research work on this language that was flowing through me. I was like, nope, nope, not ready, not ready to just rake this over the coals of academia. It felt too raw, too sacred. And so I did my dissertation on hungering, soul hunger, mind body hunger. Beautiful, beautiful piece of work. I'm really proud of that. And it was after I defended my dissertation, it's like, okay, now it's time. It's time to go there. It's time to explore this. And I allowed myself to open up and speak the language in this contained psychotherapeutic environment, because I thought, okay, well, am I actually crazy? Like, maybe. Let's just put that out there. So I went to visit a friend of mine who's a therapist, and she's like, yeah, come sit. Like, we'll explore it. And I would go into her office and just let the language pour out in these communications with the other realm, and beautiful guidance and information about my life. And she said, Siri, this is a beautiful spiritual experience. You're good. It's okay. You don't have to be afraid of this. Like, you're not crazy. It's okay. You can trust it. And so that opened up for me this journey of these language encounters. Well, I would go into trance state, channel these incredible messages. I would always record the messages. And then from there, this is powerful stuff, but I was still living a pretty fractured life. I was a healthcare executive. I had grown in leadership. I had more staff under me, about 100 staff in a couple of different cities. And this was this secret that I had to keep in Tennessee. Hello, Tennessee. Yeah. I had to keep this secret. I felt that I did. Of course, that's quite limited thinking.
And Tennessee at that time was a little different than Tennessee at this time, because we've had a lot of influx of...
True.
Hey guys, studies are showing that 68% of people that watch podcasts regularly don't click the subscribe button. Do me a huge favor. If you like this content, click subscribe so other people know where to go for the cool stuff. Thank you.
True. So much is happening so quickly, and the normalization of psychic phenomenon. Gosh, with Dan Brown's new book too, so thrilling, right? Just the popularity and normalization of mystical, unexplained phenomena as part of the human condition, as part of the human experience. So we are definitely going in the right direction there. But I was scared. I was terrified. I didn't know what to do with myself. I felt like I had to keep it hidden. And then when COVID hit, just this conflict inside of me, this unresolved fracture needed to be healed. I thought, gosh, if whatever, we don't know, the world's going to end, we're all going to die. I don't know what's going to happen. I need to be authentic. If I'm going to die, I want to be whole. I want to die. I want to return home with honor. And so that's when I wrote Guided. And it's my personal story, my coming out story. Nobody at the workplace knew. It was a complete surprise, and just thought, I've got to do this. I've got to do this for myself. And so I wrote that book for myself as my own healing journey, as my own coming out. And since then, as my journey has evolved, I've realized, okay, I overcame my own fears in speaking honestly about who I am and how I'm designed in this connection. And so now let me move forward and help others. And let me move forward and helping to normalize these experiences and normalize the field. So from there, I began working with the Institute of Noetic Sciences, doing collaborative research with Dr. Helene Wabe in exploring the professionalization of channeling and mediumship. And is the field ready for that? Is that something the field even wants? Overwhelmingly, the response is where we want ethical standards. We want certification. We want to distinguish ourselves and create this, the consumer ethics are important. Responsibility to the public is important. And so then we went into our next study, which is developing a code of ethics for the field of mediumship and channeling. We'll be presenting that actually next week at an IONS event. So maybe we can put that in the chat. I don't know when this is going to go live, but
absolutely, that's wonderful.
So that'll be next Friday. We're presenting that code of ethics to the field.
And so for people that aren't familiar with the Institute of Noetic Sciences, maybe just say a couple of words about them and what had been done with this area of responsibility prior to your bringing it to them.
Sure. So I'm a huge fan of IONS, or the Institute of Noetic Sciences. It was founded by a former astronaut, actually. Edgar Mitchell. He was the sixth man to walk on the moon. He went up into space and had this consciousness experience of interconnectedness, of oneness, looking back at the world and realizing, wow, we're one human race and we're really all part of the same. And this inner knowing, this interconnectedness is so profound and so real. And so he then developed the Institute of Noetic Sciences, noetic, of course, meaning inner knowing, this way of being, this way of knowing that's not cognitive, it's not with the mind, it can't really be explained, it's just within you, right? And so really beginning to study that type of consciousness, that field of consciousness. And the Institute of Noetic Sciences is heavily research-based, but also focused on personal experience. And it's both, right? Because when we transform the world. It kind of has to come from both angles. So
correct me if I'm wrong, but don't they also have, I believe I have it somewhere, a big thick book on spontaneous healings?
Oh, maybe. I'm not familiar with that, but that could be. They have done so much research over the years.
Always amazed me that when we get in alignment, like this work that Dr. Joe is doing, when this heart and brain coherence happens, when we peel away layers of us that aren't authentic to ourselves, it's like there's this cascade of positive things that happen in life. And I'd love to hear your opinion on that.
Absolutely. We have to get out of the way, really. Although it's a paradox, because on one hand, we have to just step aside and let our body, let our soul realign and reconnect and just kind of stay out of the way. But on the other side of the coin, we are humans. We are born with egos. We have this just really inconvenient structure of our psyche where we do get in our way all day long. And so learning to befriend that, learning to befriend the ego in order to serve the soul and serve our higher self and be in that alignment, be in that coherence, that's our work, right? All day, every day. And connecting not only with all the parts of ourselves, but also connecting with something outside of ourselves, so much bigger, so much greater, and remembering that interconnectedness, right? And so going back to IONS, just real quick, that really is their guiding hypothesis, is that we are all interconnected. So after I wrote Guided, the experience that I had was, okay, I came out, I had my big coming out as a spiritual medium and channeler. Now what? Oh, okay, well, if I'm going to own this identity, let me look to what's been done before. Let me look to ethical standards, scope of practice guidelines. Let me join the nonprofit Neutral Professional Association and kind of wait, it doesn't exist. Wait, how does this not exist? And so then I reached out to IONS. I said, there's something missing here. And so Helena, I said, oh gosh, yes, you're right. Do you want to do a study? I said, yes, very much I do. And so that's what started our first study, which was exploring professionalization among mediums and channelers, which led to our next study in developing those ethical standards.
And I'm curious, how many mediums and channelers did you reach out to when you were getting your database?
So, we ran recruitment through IONS and through several other supporting organizations. We had about 250 people sign the consent to do the study, but then only about 150 ended up completing the survey and providing the data. So we had about 150. This was United States based, practicing mediums and channelers. And then in our second study, we opened it up to a global audience of English-speaking mediums and channelers, just to make it accessible for us to be able to code the data, right? So we just did English. And so we opened that up globally. And that study it was completed by about 120 practicing mediums and channelers across the United States, UK, Australia, Canada. And for that study, we said, okay, you guys want ethical standards? What should be in them? What codes of ethics do you currently adhere to in your practice when people are coming to you and paying money for services? What is the code? And so we got lots and lots and lots and lots of feedback and responses. And some people even uploaded codes of ethics that they still adhered to, that they carried over from previous professions like social work or psychology or, physical therapy or things like that. There's several practicing mediums and channelers in our world today who have recovered from old profession, right? They were in mainstream America. They said, no, I want to do something. I have this thing in me that wants to come out. I want to heal humanity at a different level. But they're still practicing professionalism with this degree of structure, with this degree of personal accountability, which is a beautiful thing. So we gathered all of the data and qualitatively analyzed it, categorized it, and came up with ethical standards. We drafted those, we sent it back out to the group for consensus. And the way we designed the study was we need at least 75% consensus for each of these ethical standards. And we're going to do this process as many times as it takes to get approval from the participants before we publish it. On the very first round, we got 91% approval on all of the ethical standards. Said, okay, well, here we are. We've arrived. And so we ended up with 11 ethical standards, and then the 12th is like an adherence statement for the field. So these codes of ethics are completely aspirational. They're available for mediums and channelers to use, share, download, edit, adapt for their own practice, because there's no governing structure. There's no oversight. There's no big brother looking over to make sure you're going to lose your license if you don't. The field doesn't have that. Whether or not it ever will is a question. But really, if you look at the professionalization of any field over time, I mean, really, it's only been 100 years since the APA developed a code of ethics, the American Psychological Association, or American Medical Association. I think it's been closer to 50 years for like teachers, educators. So any field that develops and gains popularity over time forms and establishes integrity in order to protect the public, in order to protect the reputation of the field, right? Unfortunately, there are frauds and charlatans, just like in any field. But to educate the public on what is the difference between an evidential medium and a non-evidential medium? What is the difference between being treated respectfully with autonomy and being taken advantage of, et cetera? So that's that work, which is pretty exciting. And it had never been done before. So
is there currently an association that a psychic or a medium can? There is not.
Well, so there are a lot of groups and subgroups and fantastic training programs and certification programs. There are, organizations here. There's not an overarching neutral nonprofit professional association for the field of practitioners.
Interesting. So what was it like when you told your parents?
That's a great question. And I wrote about this in the book. It had been this thing that was bothering me. It was like welling up, inside me. It felt like this internal conflict. And I tend to be a little bit of a dramatic person in general. My family kind of makes fun of me about, being a little bit dramatic. But, my emotions can get big, and I feel big emotions. I feel deep emotions. And so I drove to Memphis. And I sat with them and I said, something's bothering me. I need to talk to you. And they were so sweet. And I was just sitting in their backyard and I was just crying and like, honey, what is it? What's going on? And I mean, I think they thought probably I was like having an affair. Or I was addicted to drugs. They thought there was something. And I said, I have this spiritual connection that I need to like follow. And I need to be this authentic part of myself. I can't hide it anymore. And they were like, well, yeah, we know.
And they already knew.
Yeah. It wasn't a big surprise. I mean, I spoke this other language. It wasn't a big surprise. And, my kids also at the time and my husband, they're like, yeah, like we hear you talk, like we know. Because what's strange is that when I didn't, over those years that I wasn't creating a safe space to practice channeling and to practice connecting, it would just spill out at the most inopportune moments, right? So if I was startled awake in the middle of the night, this language would just come out. Or if we were walking down the street and I stumbled and bumped into something, the language would spill out. Remember once I had a minor surgery done and they'd given me some anesthesia. And when I was coming out of the anesthesia, apparently I was speaking this other language. And the nurse said to my husband, well, what language does your wife speak? And he said, it's her own language. I don't know, you know. And so it spilled out all the time. Then once I created for myself a structure and the container to honor that sacred connection, then I began to be able to not only, have a place to speak the language, but have the consciousness and the reflectiveness and the connectedness and the presence to then begin to interpret and begin to speak the English version of the messages that I was receiving, right? So think about, and side note, this is our next study. So we've already gotten IRB approval.
And for our listeners, I have heard audio of you doing this, and it's a lot of not English, and then there's some English words interspersed. I'm curious, how do you interpret that, much less somebody else? I mean, there is a general feeling that comes through when you have these words interspersed within so I'm just curious about the interpretation aspect.
Yeah, it's a great question and is a very, very curious topic. I'll tell you my experience, and then I'll tell you a little bit what the research says, and then where we're going with this study. So going back to IONS, the Institute of Noetic Sciences, they've done this study on what's called a noetic signature. And noetic, again, being that inner knowing, that inner sensing. And it manifests differently for different people. So some people have a language that comes through. Some people are able to channel or connect with deceased loved ones. Some people through automatic writing have the same. Some people go into nature and just feel like the trees are speaking to them. Some people go into meditation and hear an inner voice. There's a lot of different ways that our connectedness, our spiritual connectedness manifests. For me, it's like once the sounds come out, there's this inner knowing that happens that where I receive messages. A lot of times it's visuals, like when my eyes are closed, I'll see images or symbols, right? Very common to mediums or channelers who there's this cryptic communication, right? They communicate with us in the way that our psyche is constructed to perceive. But it's just this. It's a sense. It's a felt sense, right? I don't know if you know Tyler Henry, the famous medium. There's some great Netflix series on him. What he does is he scribbles with a pen. And this is what gets him into this trance state. Just a blank piece of paper and a black pen. He just starts to scribble and scribble and scribble. And as he scribbles, this connection takes shape and these messages come through and he's scribbling and scribbling and scribbling and the words flow out from the other side. And then he'll show you this piece of paper with the scribbles on it. It's meaningless. It's not a beautiful piece of art. It's just a page full of scribbles. And the pen to paper is what allows his brain to disengage and get out of the way for those messages to come through. So my hypothesis is that glossolalia, or this language, the charismatic Christians call it speaking in tongues. In New Age circles, they call it light language.
There is a biblical background for this, isn't there?
There very much is, yes. And Paul on the road to Damascus in Acts, and he experiences this vision of connecting with Jesus for the first time. If I'm not mistaken, don't quote me on that. I think that's how it goes. Something like that. But this is very, very sacred in the Christian community. In the New Age community, it happens outside of the church setting, outside of religious doctrine, saying that it's, quote unquote, Holy Spirit or Jesus. It's a spiritual connection, right? And so that's what we're going to explore. But my hypothesis is that And there is actually some good research on this, looking at altered states of consciousness and the entropic brain. I think it's like maybe Carhart Harris, I think, that did that work. And Brzezinski, also looking at glossolalia in, the prefrontal cortex has to downregulate, right? So you look at the psychedelic literature, this is what happens, is this sort of downregulation of the prefrontal cortex so that we enter this altered state of consciousness to receive, to perceive, to open ourselves up to that which is beyond our egoic structure, right? And so my thought is that the sounds themselves are meaningless. It's sort of like the scribbles on the paper, but it's what gives the brain something to do to get out of the way so that the messages can come through. So I think other people disagree, or there's another hypothesis, perhaps, that everyone who is speaking light language out there is actually speaking the same language, and that you can compare side by side the languages, and get it. I don't know if that's true. We're going to find that out. So we're currently recruiting for that study. I don't yet have the link to share with you because the marketing team is working on that, I think, this and next week, but it should be up certainly by the end of the month. For anyone who's listening who is a light language speaker, we really, really, really want to hear from you, because we want to learn what your experiences are. And this study is going to include some personal interviews as well, in understanding, how light language communication is similar and different from the traditional charismatic Christian tongue speak, right?
Beautiful. So for you, it was this wonderful, blissful state that you were able to step into. And it seems like you can do it pretty much at will. You can just kind of decide, okay, I want to go there. And how long does it take you to get into state so that the information is flowing?
That's a good question. So sometimes if I'm in a, meditation, it's instantaneous for the language to flow through. I mean, like any second, like I said, it's like right brimming at the surface all the time. It just pours out when I don't expect it. So it takes no time at all for the language to come through. To get into a really connected state, in order for the channeled messages to come through, the deeper I allow myself to go, the more connected those messages are. The more separate they are from my ego mind, if that makes sense. So, minutes though, I mean, not hours, but yeah, I do better. Like if I have a nice long, like 15 to 20 minute deep sort of self-induced hypnotic just deepening. And from that point in the message, they're so easy. But what's ended up happening for me also is that my connection with my guides, I've been practicing now for so long, that also is right there. I often don't even need the language anymore. It's like if I need them, if I need clarity, if I need an answer, if I need to feel reconnected with source and remember there's a God that's bigger than me, it just takes a moment to close my eyes and like plug in, it's like a plug.
And as far as your energy goes, when you do this, because I know some channelers, they can only channel for a certain amount of time. They get kind of, it's almost like you're plugging into a socket that's a little bit more than our frequency can handle.
That's exactly it.
Is that what it's like for you as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So going back, I guess about 15 years now, when I first started to contain the experience and intentionally go into a trance channeling state and receive the information, when I came out of it, I had a headache. I felt like I was going to throw up. Like it took me a couple minutes. Like I was so nauseous. I was so out of it for the rest of the day. I mean, it was a big, big exhaustion on my system. My nervous system was not yet prepared to hold that energy. I mean, it took everything that I had to hold that energy. I could do it. It took everything that I had and it took everything out of me. And then slowly, slowly over time, it was less and less jarring to my system. But here's also what happened is that over time, I had to change my lifestyle and I had to change how I lived, completely how I lived. So I stepped away from my busy, chaotic, stressful executive healthcare position. I quit drinking alcohol. I really honored my sleep. I really honored my meditation time every day. I honored my and began journaling every day, long form journaling, and spending more time in nature and just doing the things that help me to stay in that state of receptivity. Essentially, I had to slow down a lot, which anybody who knew me, 5 years ago and 10 years ago would just laugh because I mean, I was a hot mess of busyness and self-importance and a packed schedule. And I was overproductive and I demanded that on everyone else. I really did a total 180. But it was mandatory in order to live in this state of authenticity, in order to protect my nervous system and to protect this spiritual connection. It just doesn't work otherwise, right? It causes too much friction inside the body and inside the psyche. Yeah.
Do you do one-on-ones? Is that the kind of work you do, or are you mostly into
Excellent question. And I do not right now. So here's kind of my journey with that is I came out and said, okay, I am a spiritual medium and channeler. This is who I am. I own this part of myself. And so then people started to ask me to do sessions, and I did do some sessions. But at the same time, I was doing this research, looking at professionalization and ethical code. And I thought, gosh, I don't know that I'm ready for prime time. I don't. There's so much responsibility in the work. I think one of the things that I learned in talking to so many other mediums and channelers is, and I knew this for myself too, having this innate gift or skill or ability, however you want to define it, is not the same as refining it in order to use it professionally, right? There is a gap there. There's a difference. And so to invest in the time to train and refine and really, really hone that skill, just like any other professional would do, like a psychotherapist would do, like a dentist would do, like a lawyer would do, right? If you're going to put yourself out in a professional field and collect money for services in a way that does no harm to the client or the sitter, there's a great responsibility in that. And there has been so much going on in my life as I've changed how I show up in the world. And a lot of that has had to do with family and my personal journey and my life structure. And so really I've spent these last, I think 5 years is fair to say, reorganizing my internal structure, right? Of how I show up in the world and how I show up in my relationships and my family system. And that whole story is how we landed here in Nashville just recently, and relocating to this environment. And I live right across from this beautiful 4,000-acre park that I walk to every day. And I saw foxes in my backyard yesterday. I see deer. I saw coyote a couple weeks ago. Just completely immersed in the world of nature, which for me, paradoxically, is a gateway into another world, another dimension, outside of physical form, outside of materialism. So that's a long-winded way of saying, I don't feel like I'm yet ready for prime time because I take the work very seriously. And I think there is profound power in information that comes through, and there's profound power in sitting with someone else in their own healing. And I think with that power, comes great responsibility, of course.
Absolutely. What are some of the shifts and changes you've seen with people that you've sat with? What are the aha moments? What are the shifts in their lives and how they take care of themselves, their loved ones?
It very, very often seems to be a return to love, this reminder, this return. It's okay. We're here. We're safe. We love you. all is well. You can relax. You don't have to worry. You're okay. You're exactly where you need to be. You're on track. You're on the path. There's so much reassurance. And the vibrational frequency is that of love, right? And that instantly puts us back into coherence when we remember love. We just exhale, and being held creates a safety and emotional security, right? That nothing else can.
I do want to echo that your book is so sweet. And I have recommended it to other people that are just very, you know, kind of open-hearted, tender people that really just need that loving space. It's very, very sweet.
Thank you. Thank you. It's written, a lot of it is channeled content from my guides. So I appreciate you saying that. And at the time that I wrote it, there was a part of me that wasn't sweet. There was a part of me that was just so filled with doubt and ego. And then these very, very sweet messages are constantly, constantly reassuring.
It seems to me, and I'm curious, I mean, it seems one of the biggest problems that we have societally is that we are so hard on ourselves,
Yeah.
and very stuck in doing rather than having any cherishing of being. And that goes for all sentient beings. We're very hard.
I agree with you. And I think this speaks to the transition towards more of the feminine, the sacred feminine, because we have lived in a very male dominant society. And that energy of doing and penetrating and results and success based in the material world and in the world of form. And as we move more into post-materialism and as we embrace the sacred feminine, it's non-linear. It's receptivity, right? It's not the outcome. It's the process. It's the connection. And it's a completely different way of thinking and being in the world that I've had to transition to personally. Again, I know, people listening who may have known me in the work environment a decade ago would say, wow, that's a total opposite from the life that I live, because I was so stuck in that. I was so stuck in outcomes and measurements and productivity and, productivity over connection and productivity over relationships. And that's not where the sacred lies, right? And so we have to open ourselves up in order and to just exist differently, to experience consciousness differently. And the more we practice that at the individual level, the more lives we touch and impact. And then over time, the more it impacts it raises the vibration of humanity, the consciousness level of humanity at this time, which is so needed.
Interesting to see how many people, myself included, although not, I mean, some people are like at extremely high levels of masculinity. We had Suzanne Giesman on, who was a commander, assistant to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And
she's so balanced, though. I mean, she really has done a beautiful job of calling in the.
What an amazing model of what it is to balance like you said, the two sides. And it doesn't have to be all harsh and 3D and bang, bang, bang. And there's this whole other thing going on that can be so amazing. And she walks that so well. And Julie Ryan, who also is another well-known channel, who had, I don't know how many businesses and patents on things, and really had climbed that ladder very well. I'm curious about your daily practices. What do you do first thing in the morning, and what do you do before you go to bed at night?
Okay. So I'll preface it by saying my husband is an Orthodox Jew.
Yes, and I want to talk about that too.
Yes.
Because you're navigating that also had to be enormously challenging.
And it goes on every single day. So again, that was part of our moving to Nashville. He's plugged in here to the community, and don't turn on electricity on Friday night to Saturday night, and walk to the synagogue, and all of that. And as part of the work that I've done and that we've done together in relationships and healing and focusing on love rather than judgment, I've really embraced his world as a way to stay connected in that. And my perspective is that, God the source of all exists in every moment, in every person, in every molecule, in every situation. There's no environment in which the source doesn't exist, right? And so how can I find God here? How can I find love here? How can I stay in coherence in this community as well? And it's been a beautiful, beautiful journey. It really, really surprised me. I was so negative at first, very shut off and negative and judgmental. And this can't be right. This is right. But it's another manifestation of the all that is, right? So long-winded way of saying, one of the very, very first prayer that Orthodox Jews say in the morning upon waking, I think is so beautiful. And I don't say it perfectly, but the message of it, right? I reiterate in my mind. And it's like when you're first lying in bed, before you even open your eyes, it's this prayer to remember your interconnectedness with all other humans, right? So it's, may I treat others as I treat myself. Something like that in the Hebrew version, right? Which I think is so beautiful, because when we remember that we are love and that the other person is love and that God exists within me and God exists within you, and we focus on connection rather than judgment and separation, then we're in coherence and miracles happen and we are in the flow and we are our highest, best selves, right? So that's what I start with. And then I come downstairs and I make a cup of coffee. And with that cup of coffee, I do my journaling, and I start with my gratitude journal, minimum 5 things that I'm grateful for, but it's usually a pretty long paragraph, as authentically grateful, small and big. Just, I start with that. Then I do long form journaling, sort of like morning pages, which I love, Julia Cameron. And because writing is a passion of mine. So I write, clear the consciousness, clear the ego, clear all the garbage, just get it out there. I do also a Course in Miracles journal, because I love Course in Miracles. And so I do the daily lesson, a little bit of journaling on the daily lesson. All right, now I'm ready to meditate. So I've done all of that, and then I sink into my meditation. And my meditation starts with a connection with myself, with my essence. And I invite my ego self to remember its servitude to my soul self. So I open myself to connecting with something bigger. I open the part of myself that is interconnected with all, and I try and return. Sometimes I'll return to like a childhood self or a past life self, but I just try and get to that point of integrity and authenticity at all of my levels, right? My soul level, my ego level, my childhood level, my everything. Okay. So, and then I spend as much or as little time there as required each day. It changes based on what's going on with me. And I will use mudras. I notice that my hands are opening here now. And there's so much that's come through for me when I've done channeling work, where my guides have, and they've said specifically in my meditation, here's what they've invited, is an opening of the hands, and they've sort of shown me this, to like do this sort of rubbing and opening the center of the palm, right, and then holding the space for the light. Once I hold the space for the light, I imagine this bubble, this globe of light that I kind of plot myself right inside, using my third eye to project down. I'm holding it kind of at my heart center. I'm using my third eye to project down into that sphere of light, whatever it is that I'm holding in the space of meditation and prayer. And I start with myself, and then I go through the list of everyone in my life. So then I hold in that space my husband, and then I hold in that space our marriage, and then I hold in that space each of my children and everything that I know that's going on with them. And I'm calling in healing, and I'm calling in connection, and I'm calling in wisdom for them. And I'm seeing them, perceiving them as whole, right? Not as broken, but perceiving them as whole. And then I go through my all of my children, their spouses, my grandchildren. Then I go into the community, I go into my sisters and my parents and my teachers, especially asking for extra blessings for my teachers, being grateful for my teachers, and then for whatever else it is that's going on. So I'm just holding this space and holding this light. And then, of course, whatever is in me that needs processing, it kind of all happens in that state, which is somewhat a meditation, somewhat a prayer intention setting, but I try really hard to stay away from words and cognitions. And I try and just hold the light and hold space for what I want to see or perceive, which sometimes is a struggle because, if someone is unwell or struggling with something, I want to call in healing for that person. But at the same time, I know the journey of the soul includes so many ups and downs and things that the cognitive ego mind perceives as bad or broken. But sometimes those darknesses are our richest teachers, and that our soul has set up a life to experience those things, right? And so I don't want to ask for things to not be people's lessons. So it's sort of this little internal battle that I go through in holding space and healing and just trying not to overlay words. So that's a very long-winded answer to your question.
No, it's beautiful. How long does that take you in the morning?
So my morning routine is anywhere from 1 to 3 hours.
Wow. This is
intense.
Hey.
It's intense. I'm telling you, my life has shifted dramatically, and I hold just immense, deep gratitude for this stage in my life, and how my husband and I have organized how we show up in the world. And I am incredibly blessed right now at this stage to not be responsible for bringing in an income, and instead for using this time to invest in healing, to invest in prayer, to invest in study, and to invest in just learning more mystically and sharing that. It's an incredible, incredible blessing.
How did he come to accept this kind of odd way, from his perspective, probably, that you connect to spirit?
So he shares his journey in the book Guided, and in fact is really fun because when we did the audio book version, I brought him into the studio, and so he read his chapter, which is really cool. So you hear his own voice, sharing his journey. My husband is, in addition to being phenomenal, he's a scientist. He has a very, well, I tend to be a deep feeler and connector. He is pretty neutral. I'm not going to say he's cold and calculated, because he also has absolute spiritual depth, but his mind works very differently than mine. His mind works in facts and figures. And you were talking about patterns. I was laughing, one day at the end of the day, we're kind of connecting. Oh, how was your day? How was your day? And he said, oh, it was good. I talked to my patent attorney. Oh, good. Things work out. Yeah. This patent's going to go through and, Japan or whatever it is. Like, oh, that's cool. So which number does this make? When we said, oh, this is like number 12. He's like, man, that's crazy. Like 12 patents. He's like, well, honey, just this year. Oh my God. Who are you? Who are you? Right. So he got this long list of scientific patents, and he's brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant, but his mind is very factual, right? He doesn't get caught up in emotion. And so for him, this just is, right? It just is what it is. It's just who I am and how I'm made. And, there wasn't a lot of judgment around it. I think the work, he's been very, very supportive and very open, and he has his worldview. And so in the Orthodox Jewish worldview, mediumship is a big no-no. Right. So this has been part of our healing and part of our understanding one another's worlds. He's very supportive. And so really, people who are in that world, who are open-minded, here's the distinguishing point. There's two. I'll say there's one for mediumship and one for channeling, okay? And the one for mediumship in Orthodox Judaism is you are not to disrupt spirits. You are not to disrupt souls they're busy. They're in the other realm. They're doing stuff. Don't bug them. If they come to you with a message, okay, fine. They've come to you, they have something to say, they need to communicate something that's different, right?
Mm-hmm.
So being receptive to it rather than reaching and grabbing for it and putting it on a pedestal and wow, isn't this cool? And, so that's kind of where that line of distinction is in that community, right? And then the other on the channeling side is one that I've been working through and processing myself as I've been trying to hold these different worlds. And within Orthodox Judaism, sort of, I would say the main, and people may disagree with me, but to me, in studying it, seems like the main lesson is there is one God. There's one overarching source, being, intelligence. It's one. There's this interconnectedness. There's not many, there's one. And when you're opening yourself up, to ensure that you're opening yourself up to that source. And so to open up and get messages from lower level spirit, like it can be hurtful, not helpful. It can be confusing and not healing, right? And so that line of distinction is important. And then I'll add only the final thing, which is what you hold as sacred. Right. And so there's a lot of no-nos in Orthodox Judaism about idol worship. I worship idols, you worship God. Okay, fine. In our world, there's a lot of ways to define idol worship. It's the iPhone, it's celebrities. There's so many things that steal our time that we give our power away to. Right. And so that's the definition of it. And so just this kind of point of caution that in mediumship and channeling, there's not a worship that's happening, right? There's just an openness and a receptivity.
Wow, that's beautiful. And it's so incredible that you guys have made this work.
We work at it every day, and it wasn't always that way. So, the drama in the last 5 years, as my life has been reorganizing, these things are never clean, right? I can sit here today and say, oh, it's all roses and wonderful. But the reality is that between the time that I came out in 2021 and here we are today, just now, early 2026, there was major drama and upheaval in our life. And I left and I filed for divorce and I moved out and I said, we're not going to do this. I can't, set boundaries and I want something different. And over time and over conversations and softening and opening and hearing one another and recognizing our triggers and where we could activate. It is hard. Relationships are hard work. And so this is where my work has been since writing the book has been, like I said, in my internal and family microcosm, because who am I to put myself out there as a professional and help others heal if my life is a hot mess, right? I think there's a responsibility to do the work ourselves. And the work is hard and it's messy and it's awkward and it's uncomfortable and it's nonlinear. And sometimes we go through these really dark, confusing times where we're upside down. But we have to keep going, keep going, keep going. So we've been through a lot to get to the point where we are now, to have honest, open, respectful dialogue that's curious rather than vitriolic or judgmental or shut down, right? Because really, he is me and I am him. We're interconnected. If I really truly believe that, and I do, that there is one unified field of intelligence, then I'm part of every other person that I come into relationship with. And I have to operate with that belief every day in my family system too, and in the religious community in which I find myself.
And isn't it interesting that the golden rule is in every single religion on the face of the earth?
Well said.
So I want to know your thoughts about the quantum physics perspective that there's no such thing as time and space and everything is everywhere all at once. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Okay. I have a fun story about that, actually. So this is years ago. I don't even remember what book it was, but I ordered a book on Amazon, something I wanted to read. And it didn't come. Instead, I got in the mail a book, and it's called The Psyche and the Singularity. Desmond, I think maybe he's the author. And I was like, well, that's weird. It's thick, a really thick book, like a thick scientific book. I was like, well, that's not what I ordered. And so I sent it back. I didn't order this. I got the wrong book. Fine. A couple weeks goes by. The book comes again, Psyche and the Singularity, instead of the one that I said, well, I guess I'm supposed to read this book. So I read that book, and it's a thick read. I didn't quite, a lot of it was over my head because it was hardcore physics, but also it's the interplay of physics and the psyche. Okay, so it talks about Carl Jung's collective unconscious and the psyche, right? But then it also talks about the singularity and this one point of now where everything that always has and will exist has already occurred, and that we're just living the shadow of that, the projection of that, but that how that plays out both at the same time, simultaneously in the world of form and matter and within our psyche, right? So it's the interplay of those two concepts. And so that was the first time I was introduced to that concept. And it came to me unsolicited.
Is the author a physicist, or does the author have a spiritual background?
No, it's more of a physicist type book. Like I said, it's like a thick science book.
You know what? I'm so nuts that I actually listened to 18 hours of David Bohm and Jay Krishnamurti talking.
Nice.
Talk about a collision between science and spirituality. That was quite an amazing talk.
Nice. Yeah, I love anything mind expanding. I really do. At the end of the day, I mean, I love exploring these topics. I love talking about these topics. I love postulating. But at the end of the day, I always have to admit, there is so much more that I don't know that I do know. My hypothesis is that the world truly is incomprehensible. Like the farther we get spiritually, intellectually, looking at consciousness research, the more we know, the more we realize we don't know. And that's the fun part, though, right? Is just diving into it and getting really excited about it, and then surrendering and saying, it's a mystery. It is
It reminds me of what Stephen Jobs said when he was dying. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God.
There you go.
When you see that, it's like so
Yes.
incomprehensibly. I've interviewed so many people who have had near-death experiences, and it's overwhelmingly beautiful from what they say. So if you had a megaphone and the whole world was listening, what would you like to say for a minute?
Remember your interconnectedness with all that ever has been and all that ever will be, and with one another. And choose love. Choose love. As hard as it is to forgive, to let go, it's worth it. And it will heal you. It will heal those around you. And ultimately, it will heal the world.
It's funny how the things that we regret the most are the things that are not loving.
Mm-hmm. That's what we forget, right? We forget our interconnectedness. We think we're separate. We think that we have to protect this ego identity of ours, and it's seductive, and we all fall prey to it all day, every day. It's this constant return, constant return, constant return.
And if you were to go back and talk to 10-year-old Siri for a minute, what would you like to say to her?
Play. Be creative. It's going to be okay. Just play.
And what's so cool about that is that lights up a whole different part of the brain and gives us access to so much more. That's so beautiful.
Again, it helps us get out of the way.
So I love your book, Guided, Journey into the Unknown to Awaken the Soul and Live in the Truth, especially for people that just want that really sweet, warm-hearted connection. It's very, there's a lot of love in there. And I love that your husband recorded that part, because it's so wonderful to hear the author directly speaking, because I just find there's so much more wisdom and energy that one can absorb from that. How else can people follow you? Where do they find you? I know your book's on Amazon. It's on Audible.
That's right. That's right. And SiriZemel.com. I did just put the Code of Ethics for Mediums and Channelers on YouTube. So that's Dr. Siri Zemel. And probably I'll put there as well, once we have that recruitment link for light language speakers, that'll be on YouTube as well. Or anybody who'd like to participate in the study, and we would like hundreds and hundreds of light language speakers so that we can normalize this experience.
Beautiful. So that's Siri, Siri Zemel, Zemel.com. Is that correct?
You got it.
Is that right? Okay, great. Always like to get the spelling right. So people who are listening and aren't watching video, they can go to your website. Thank you so much, Dr. Siri, for being here on Next Level Healing. Folks, share this with anybody that will get value from it, and click like and subscribe so that we can bring you even more fabulous episodes with people who are opening up our awareness and consciousness.
Thank you.
This podcast is intended for the purpose of providing information and education. It does not provide advice and is not meant to be used for any self-diagnosis or the replacement of any kind of licensed professional. The creators and individuals appearing here do not endorse any specific tests, positions, medications, products, or procedures. The views and opinions are expressed in this podcast are of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent.